Probably one of the most maybe misunderstood and least want to be discussed addictions in our world today is the addiction to love and the addiction to sex. We did a sex addiction YouTube video here not too long ago, and today I want to talk about the addicted to love concept. I had an interesting email the other day from a woman who continued to return to a partner who was not good for her, and she said, David, you know, I don't know what to do next because I've gotten this far away, meaning like 3 weeks, and all of a sudden I find myself, you know, giving in once again to a card or flowers, and then we're back together because I absolutely crave his touch, and making love to him makes me feel like I'm in another planet. And then she paused in her email. You could see this thought process, ... And then she continued saying, and within a short period of time, we're back at each other's throats, arguing every day about the smallest little insecurities and jealousies you could ever imagine. So I had a chance to actually contact her, and we talked for a while about the whole concept of love addiction. Very next day, I had a client come in and sit down and say to me, you know, I've been separated from this boyfriend of mine for the past 2 years. That's a long separation. And we've dated other people in between, but we continue to come back together. And I don't understand why, but anyone else I've ever been with, I've never felt the same sexually as I do with him. You know, there's something about that relationship. And I said, well, why is it that you guys separated? And she looked at me and she had the smile on her face and she was shaking her head and she said, because we are absolutely the worst mix possible. She goes, oil and water doesn't come close to describing what it is that we are personality-wise. But there's a craving for his touch. And again, I heard the word craving. Now with the second client, the individual that I worked with who came in the office and sat down and told me about this 2-year separation and dating other people, it was fascinating. As she did the work and the writing, she found over the next 4 weeks exactly what I was talking about, that it was a love addiction, a sex addiction that she was feeling. And I want to talk about that today. She eventually was able to move through it, and by doing the work that we discussed, that's available at support groups across the country, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous and Sex Addicts Anonymous, there's all kinds of support groups, or people like myself that do this work one-on-one. But, you know, through the writing process, she was able to see the addiction. When she's able to understand the addiction of love and the addiction of sex, she was able then to separate it. And here's the coolest thing in the world, ladies and gentlemen, is that right after doing the 4 weeks together, she was drawn back to him. She went to a party. There he was. She hadn't seen him in quite a long time. And immediately, you know, he made his move, as he should, because that's what addicts do, right? And it takes 2 people to be in an addicted relationship. Remember that. And the very next day, she went over his house against the best interest of herself and her friends and her family. And she said for the first time, she could sit there and see that this was not going to happen again. It was like, oh my Lord, that's so powerful on her part. But she did the work necessary. She did the writing, the introspective, to be able to separate herself from the addiction and see it was what it was, for what it was. So let's talk about that. You know, when people come in and I say, let's look at the concept of addiction with love. They look at me and say, what do you mean I'm addicted to love? Well, let's talk about the release of chemicals. What release of chemicals? Did you know that when it comes to addiction of love, when it comes to addiction of sex, the chemicals that are released in the brain are as powerful as heroin to the heroin addict? They're that powerful. They hit the brain in a heartbeat, in a second. You know, some researchers actually have looked at the chemical that's released in the brain that's highly predominant in women, oxytocin. And in oxytocin, it's a bonding chemical. It's the chemical that's released when women make love. And that chemical is so powerful, which is one of the reasons why after making love, women like to spoon and cuddle and nurture. And it's a bonding chemical. And that is a powerful chemical, ladies and gentlemen. It's as powerful as any drug on the market. And that's just one of the multiple of chemicals that are released when people feel affection and when people feel a longing and when people feel a high attraction, a physical attraction, or even a high spiritual attraction to someone, can start the release of these chemicals in the brain that make us act in crazy ways, you know? But one of the scary things about sex and love addiction is that the people that are addicted to love, or the concept of love, or the fantasy of love, is that they will return to relationships that are unbelievably unhealthy for them. And oftentimes when they sit in my office, they have patterns of people that they just can't break up with. Have you ever experienced that? Where you continue to go back to a relationship over and over and over again, even though you know it's not the right mix? And sometimes it's like the sex is so incredible, and it may not just necessarily be because they're such a great lover, but it's because of the fact that they've got our number. Well, if you want to throw in their pheromones and all the other chemicals that are released in the body when we're attracted to someone, a high desire for sexual intercourse or sexual relation with a person that may not be a good match for us psychologically, philosophically, emotionally, could be a perfect match for that addictive craving that goes on within the body. This topic is so big. I know it's not enough time that we have right here to get into it, but I wanted to wet your whistle and sort of have you be thinking about it, that, you know, if you find yourself being drawn back right now to an unhealthy relationship, or if you find yourself in the past being drawn back to a relationship where that it was never really right, but you just couldn't be without that person. You know, it reminds me as I'm talking here about a third client that recently called me on the phone and was in a relationship, and at day 4 she called me and said, I'm going out of my mind. He won't return my calls, he won't even return my texts, and I feel this unbelievable desire to be with him and this incredible fear I've lost him for good. Now, if I give you my definition of addiction, which I'm going to in a second, you're going to see how all this adds up to an addictive process. My personal definition as an addiction recovery coach of addiction is when we return to a thought, a behavior, or a substance over and over again, even though it is not good for us and even though the end results are not healing, healthy, and loving. That's the definition of an addiction. So if it's a substance, a thought, or a behavior, you know, if you think of someone that you had a relationship with, and every time you think of them, you have a sting in your stomach of, oh, I really want to be with them, even though you know it was the worst relationship in the world. I need to see that person, even though you know it's not the right place. The process has to begin. The healing has to begin. Time heals nothing. Remember that. Time will heal nothing. And what we'll do is, if we come from that addictive space and relationship, the neediness, the feeling that we can't be complete without a partner in our lives, that unbelievable unhealthy desire for acceptance by another human being on an intimate level, all of those things lead to addiction. Let me help you if I can. Visit talkdavid.com. I'd love to work with you. Everything is confidential, of course. Go ahead and share this video with as many people as you can, because love addiction is really common. Sex addiction is really common, but love addiction is even more common. And if you look at the media, how it builds up that if you're not in a relationship, you're losing out on life. It makes no wonder that a lot of people stay in that cycle of love addiction. But I would love to help you here. And if you want, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube account so that the new videos that come out, you'll automatically have them sent right to you. Okay? Let me know if I can help you. It's talkdavid.com. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.